July. Thank you. Good morning. Welcome. It's January 18th, 2023 to the Port Washington Union Free School District Audit Committee. We have a lot to cover and are very excited. We have several special guest speakers today joining us. We will introduce them as their presentation points run, but I think we're ready to just dive into it. Ms. Anderson, we're going to start with you. We want to welcome you to the Audit Committee. Thank you. She, for those of you that don't know, Ms. Anderson is our part-time claims auditor, and she is going, we've never had her, our internal claims auditor, we've never included her, to my knowledge, in our meetings for the Audit Committee, and since this is one of the functions that we are responsible for oversight, we thought we would have to come, provide an overview, and I know that you prepared something to present to us.
Yes, I just have, so the first quarter, July 1 through September 30th, just a quick overview of what I present to you through Donna with her treasurer's report to see, just everything's on one page for you.
That's perfect. And just to clarify, the Board of Education is receiving some of these reports, board reports, et cetera, that we can review on a monthly basis. Ms. Anderson is providing a summary of all of that for us to look at as an audit committee to review and ask any questions. Include us in the process.
If I could just add a little bit, just in case people don't know the process. What happens is a purchase order is issued first. Whoever wants to purchase items has to have a purchase order. It's reviewed by the business office. The purchasing agent, Jessica Mack, she'll give rise to the request and it'll be turned into a purchase order. The items are purchased, then when they're received, the person receiving it checks off on the invoice to make sure everything is there. Once they say it's okay to pay, that goes to Jessica, the business office, and they'll say, is all the documentation here? It looks okay, and they'll put it in for payment. They'll issue a check. So what happens, it's called a warrant. There'll be a warrant with probably 30 checks. It could be Maura could review all of these. You could have multiple warrants from different funds. So that all goes to Maura, who's in a different department than the business office. So you have your segregation there. Maura will review it for accuracy to make sure the correct amount is paid. Is it going to the right place? Are these things the district should be purchasing? And then she'll have questions for Jessica. And Maura, how long have you been doing this for?
This April will be 6 years.
Okay, great. All right, so then if you'd like to take us through.
Well, I don't know if I have any copies, to be honest with you. I didn't know.
We can share, don't you worry. Here, do you want me to hand out? I can hand out while you're. Thank you. I'll share. We're gonna see. No offense.
See, exactly.
Yeah. Share. Be real cozy here. I guess we have enough actually.
Just if I could hide.
Yes.
So I could hear. If there's questions. Thank you. Okay, so what you're looking at is there are many funds that the district has checks. For an example, a C fund is a lunch fund. So that means whether we're paying equipment repairs for the kitchen equipment, that comes out of one fund. The bond funds are H funds. We have a capital and we have a bond. So everything is broken down per fund of what I audit with the sequence of check numbers. And it's pretty much self-explanatory. So for the first quarter, which was July 1 through September 30th of 2022, the number of checks that I reviewed was over 1,000 checks. And then the dollar amount. And what I do is I take this, I condensed it from, if you see attached, this is what I give to the board on a monthly basis. So I just added up, okay, so for September, they were 28 or 23. So I just added July, August, and September. So everything is condensed for you on this one page.
So, Maura, could you take us through the auditing process from your perspective?
Okay, my perspective is what we call a voucher packet, which is all of the backup, the purchase order, the rec, the invoices, the packing slip, whatever is given to me. And once the check is cut, they give me the check stub, and that's what we call a voucher packet. So with that, I get the warrant, and I check to make sure the check number on the check stub is the same as the check warrant, because sometimes the checks have been off. So that's very important. I check the total, I check, then once I do that, then I go through every single page. What I have to do is I have to stamp every single invoice to see that I have viewed it. I make sure that the invoice amount is the same that's on the warrant, the entry for the warrant. There have been on occasions where the invoice is a different amount than what was on the warrant. So that's what I would put on the report. Then once I do that, everything is fine, I initial it and I go on to the next. Just if you see my notes on the bottom, my main concerns are confirming purchase orders, which means that the invoice came before the purchase order. In our purchasing policy, the purchase order has to come first. And another thing I see are invoices that are getting paid over 90 days. So, but, I work very closely with the business office. We are really trying really hard to clear all this up. And I do work very closely with Jessica and some of her staff. And as soon as there's something flagged, they are right on it right away and we rectify it.
So to address the confirming purchase orders, some instances of that could be somebody wants to go to a conference. So they'll call and they'll actually book the conference, or they'll get a quote for something and say, okay, go ahead and do it, but a purchase order hasn't been put in place, which really defeats the purpose of having a purchasing agent, because you're supposed to make sure the funds are there and it's okay to obligate them and that it's an appropriate purchase. So one of the things we've put into place is, it's called a violation notice, where people actually receive a piece of paper that says, you're in violation of the district's purchasing policy. Why did this happen and how are we going to avoid it in the future? So I think it's really reduced quite a bit.
Yes, some things definitely have. I have seen a difference over the past couple of months where the entries of what I have to report have
decreased,
slowed down.
but there's always a room. A lot of people, it's educating also the teachers, and most of the clerical we do, Jessica does, she does like yearly or
Trainings I do, whenever
Yeah.
we have superintendent conference day, I do trainings on purchasing and how to use Envision and the right steps.
And reminding, and we have someone, Michelle Kalinsky, in the business office. She's actually preparing like a checklist of what to look for, like if you're going on a conference, make sure this is done first. So we really are trying to educate our staff, because they're really the people that can help us not have confirming purchase orders. So one of the other things we do is the vendor that actually violated it. Like if I called someone up and said, send me 20 MacBooks, and somebody did it, we would send a letter to Apple and say, if you do this again, you won't be paid. Letting them know that they're in violation as well. So it's kind of a two-way street that we're hoping we can narrow it down more. So, and as far as the 90 days, like over 90 days, I think that's really unacceptable, which we both were talking about, and Jessica too. We're doing things to have like a tickle system where in the business office, if we haven't got something back, reach out to the school building and say, where is this? Do you have it? Maybe it's on back order, you're not going to get it. Because a lot of times what happens is an order is sent that's not complete, so people are leaving it open thinking, oh, we're still gonna get it. But now the invoice increases in the amount of days, so we're working to improve it, but it's definitely good to have these reports and see it, because I'm not always on top of, every single thing that goes out, and this really is great. I know Jessica's been working on it.
Thank you, Kathy, for that. I did Laura. I'm gonna open it up to the committee for questions unless you have, I think that was your presentation to
No,
this
I think,
point.
I think it's pretty much, set in stone. I do warrants run every Thursday. I audit every week. I usually stay late on Thursday nights. I finish up over the weekend. I have everything back to the business office by Monday. And then we take it from there. If I have discrepancies, they work on it, they send it back to me. And that's how we've been working it for a couple of years now.
Wonderful. I'm gonna open it to the committee. Do you guys have any questions on this or any of the information presented before us?
I have a quick question. So it's less of a question, but more of a request for the next time we run this. So, being on this committee, I always think about how do we make sure that we're not Rosalind, right? And this seems to be one of those processes. And so I think something that would help me is just seeing who the checks went to, if we can see, right, so that,
Well, I do have that on what we call a claim summary report.
okay,
I did not hand all of those out. I didn't know if it was necessary, but as you see here.
Yeah.
I'll send you a copy.
okay,
That is individual per violation.
okay,
So you'll see who they went to, who the amount was.
But we get it in our weekly packet, when we get the claims.
Yes, I give that to you.
The Board of Education.
Yes.
yeah, but I mean, what
That's who the checks go to.
Sure, but what would, okay, so I think what would be helpful is, if you are auditing checks, just to put next to the value of the check, the person, the organization that it went to, I think. that would
Right,
be-
but if you see that, if there's so many, there could be 30
Right.
on each warrant. They could say, for example,
Oh, so the value of the check, so a $53,000 check could be,
it could be many
Many
from
checks,
the
right.
claim summary report.
got it. Okay, so it's a lot of different
Yes.
organizations, because I'm looking at 2.2 million and I'm like, I don't know who 2.2 million went to. But it's because it went
Right,
to
31 different.
30, yeah. 30
Yes.
different
And that's what this backup is.
Okay.
It lays it out per, whether it's confirming over 90, incorrect remittance. So, and then what I do is I tally from every warrant and I put it on the claims audit report. But the claims summary does come with you,
Gotcha.
when I give it to Donna, and
Okay,
then she submits it to the Board of Ed.
okay, great, thank you.
Maybe what would be helpful, I don't know if this is the direction we're going, is under the total, for the next time, again, this is our first time bringing this report to the committee, is under total number of claims requiring follow-up. If there was a breakout that just said it was over 10 were over 90 days, 15 were whatever, I don't know, is that feasible just to give that, just so you don't have to give everyone the claim summary, or is that too much to?
But I think the claim summary is pretty important.
It is, so maybe we just need to include it for the audit committee. Again, I'm just trying to make it worthwhile
Yes.
for this committee. We have two.
Because that's
groups.
where it breaks it all down for you, on the claim summary report.
So maybe for the next time when we do a quarterly report, we'll include the claim summary report.
For the
For
quarter.
the quarter,
Mhm.
for the audit committee to have as additional backup. How does that sound?
That's fine.
Great.
Just one other question.
Yeah.
It says that there were 25 that were rejected. They were rejected outright, like completely, they were void, or they have to resubmit?
It's usually they would have to be void and redone, whether it was an incorrect amount being paid, whether it was an incorrect remittance, whether, those are the main things, that if a sales tax was included, so that we would have to reject, and they would have to be voided out and reissued correctly.
Were there any that come through where it's not gonna be paid, but just, it's improper and they're not gonna be reimbursed?
No,
Just-
honestly, for 99% of the time, it's just, the little things here and there that, we have to take care of. But none is really ever just say totally rejected, no.
Okay.
There's, the rejected ones are sales tax, voided checks, if it was an incorrect amount paid on the invoice against the purchase order.
And sometimes you'll have a change of address for a vendor and might not have it in the system yet, so then it'll get
And I still would approve that, knowing that they will do a handwritten envelope until it gets changed in the system. So we're not holding back that check for the vendor, we would just do a handwritten envelope.
Okay.
So they would never be rejected.
And everything we do is manual checks, we don't do ACHs or wires or anything like that.
I don't audit wireless, I do know that there are a few, but I don't do that. I do anything with accounts payable that I have a check.
Any other questions?
We don't write manual checks, but we may do wire transfers.
Anything else from the committee? No?
We all good with this?
Yes, thank you.
Laura, you did great. This was wonderful. We really appreciate it and thank you. And we look forward to seeing you again at the end of our sessions in June, probably June, July, I guess, right? For the end of our quarter and we look forward to it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
So you can stay if you want.
I haven't.
I'm sure. You did. What? You didn't want to stay.
A lot of work to do. I work in buildings and grounds, so.
Yes, you're all, this is your side hustle, right?
Yes.
So thank you again. We really appreciate it.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. All right, excellent. Now we're up to our next item on our agenda, which is our internal auditor's risk assessment update. We're going to introduce our internal auditors from Milwaukee. They're here, but I just want to point out for everyone, the board did approve at its last board meeting this risk assessment update. Next time we will plan it better so that it's to the committee first and then the Board of Education. But in lieu of keeping everyone in the loop, and since we have our auditors here, we wanted to at least provide insight and an update. And then Kathy's going to fill in with the corrective action that the board is not going to be aware of yet. So, all right, do you want to start off or?
Well, do you want to just take us through, I know you didn't really talk about reviewing risk assessment.
Yeah, let's
today,
talk
but
about
do you wanna-
that and then some natural, conversation to the corrective action plan. So, good morning, everyone. We are the district's internal auditors from Naraki Smith. I'm Dimitri Pantelescas. I'm the partner on this engagement. And we work together on these internal audit projects, for the district. So we're happy to be here and see again, friendly faces. And, we wanted to present to you our annual risk assessment update. And this is one of the requirements as your internal auditors. So the district, as you know, has a claims auditor that looks at every single check that leaves the district. It also has the external auditors that, audits the financial statements and provide an opinion on the materiality. And it also has us, internal auditors, who are kind of like in the between, where we look not only at the financials, not only the checks, but we also look at the internal controls and the operations. And so we look at how the processes work, so we make sure that the payments are accurate or the financial statements are free from material misstatements. So the annual risk assessment is one of the two functions that is required. The other function is to do a cycle audit, a more deep dive in a specific functional area. But, the risk assessment covers a review of multiple areas. And in our practice, we cover 21 areas. And it's a function, this internal audit universe has grown since we started, back in 2005, when the internal audit function was officiated as a state mandate. And if you actually go to a couple of pages down, from page 5, 6, and 7, you'll see all the 21 areas that we're covering, which each one of them includes sub-processes that we review. In total, there are 92. So you can understand that our risk assessment process is a very intense, analysis, and we cover a lot of ground. In order to do that, we meet with a lot of key people, and we discuss the internal controls, the operations, who they're responsible for, how the documentation flow between departments, and we review certain documents, to make sure what they represented us is actually true. So the documentation can include policies, can include reports generated, from the systems, can also include the follow-ups from the prior audit reports and see what the implementation status is. So that can include our prior audit reports or the external audit, prior reports. In case there was a state controller, reports, we'll look at those. Now, the results of the risk assessment update are actually summarized on page 4. And here you can see that for the fiscal year that we did this risk assessment, we had high, there are high, moderate, and low risk ratings. So we have 0 high risk ratings, which right off the bat, this is a very positive risk profile for the district, because high risk means that absent of any controls, policies, oversight, or procedures, there's going to be a high risk that something may go wrong. And that we want to see the opposite. So we want to see low risk ratings where there is oversight, there is checks and balances, there is segregation of duties to make sure that there's a low risk that something may be paid inaccurately or something may go wrong. And as you can see, 92% of the 92 sub-processes that we looked at are in the low risk range. So that's a very positive risk profile for the district. And there's another table right next to it where it shows the changes from one year to the next. So we have a decrease from moderate to low, which is a positive sign, but we also have certain areas where it increased from low to moderate. And I can show you that more in the detailed matrices in the next pages. We have 3 recommendations in our risk assessment, in accounting and reporting, facilities, and exit class activity funds. I'll talk more about them in a minute. As part of our risk assessment process, we looked at 2 prior risk assessment recommendations, and we were happy to see that the district took action and has completed those recommendations. And then as an outgrowth of this risk assessment, after we did our review, did our interviews and analysis of records, we also developed an internal audit plan for this fiscal year. And one of the areas that we discussed to look at was safety and security. And we have already started that work. So, and we can give you an update on that as well. Now, on the matrices, pages 5, 6, and 7, you can see, again, all the areas that we looked at, but we have certain columns that I think it would be good to explain what they mean. So we have an inherent risk column in the middle of the page. This is, our understanding of the school district industry, what the inherent risk would be absent of any controls. So you'll see in that highlighted column that a lot of are high, moderate, but that's because we want to create a benchmark or a basis, like, what's the worst case scenario would be in the school district industry. And comparatively, we have the 2 other columns, 2021 and 21-22, where we see the district, your risk is in each of these areas. So a lot of them you can see they're low, but we have some changes. For example, in accounting reporting, the external, internal claims auditing from low to moderate. And this is one of the areas that we have a recommendation in the report, where we want the district, to include or impose on its website the external audit, reports, and also our internal audit risk assessments. This has been a comment from the most recent state controller audit reports that have done audits on school districts, and we have seen this more and more that they're commenting on. So we wanted to be proactive and, bring it up to you, the risk assessment, so we can, address it, in case they come. We go to page 6, there you see also another change, on the purchasing, from low to moderate, where, and that was because for the same, explanation that your claims auditor, gave from their reports regarding confirming purchase orders. So because we have those number of instances, we raised it to low to moderate, where, we want to make sure that initial pest controls and following its purchasing policy. The purchasing policy, as we said, you have to have a purchase order before, you issue it, before you pay an invoice. And then, we also have changes in exoclassroom activity, in general controls and reporting. And we have a recommendation in this area where we recommend for the district to appoint a faculty auditor for the purpose of monitoring the exoclassroom activity funds and making sure that the records between the club advisors and the central treasurers are reconciled. So this is another comment that has been more common with state control audits when you look at the exoclassroom activity areas. They're really highlighting and recommending for a faculty auditor to be appointed and review these records. In the past, this has not been a comment or an observation because you were comfortable with the mitigating controls. Whereas you had the central treasurer looking at the club advisor records, communicating and making sure that their balances agree and match. However, we have been in presence with these interviews with the state control auditors, and they're not really happy with that. They're not willing to see that this is a good control. So that's why, in a way, because we're losing the battle with those arguments, we're kind of now advocating for our clients to appoint a faculty auditor, because if they come in the audit, they would have the same finding and the same, conversation. So it's recommended to have an independent person to review these records, making sure that they reconcile.
And Dimitri, just to add to that on this last point, but this is something that this committee was apprised of and the board has been aware of a number of times in our external audit. This was really one of our issues, and corrective action plans have been implemented and things are looking at. So now we're just seeing a marriage between both external and internal, and a highlight priority for the state comptroller.
When we did our corrective, do we have a faculty, did we put in a faculty advisor?
We did not, and
That was one of the things I wanted to discuss with the audit committee.
okay. So sorry, thank you very much. I just wanted to
No, it's okay.
bring that point together.
Yeah. And on page 7, we have the remaining set of controls that we looked at, and you can see there's been a change in cybersecurity from low to moderate. And that is as an outgrowth of the work that we have done last year, the NIST gap analysis, the cybersecurity audit. And it's an area that we have to be in compliance because of Ed Law 2D, and we have to be in compliance with the NIST framework. And there's room for improvement, not just in this district, in generally a lot of districts. There's a lot of room for improvement and to be in compliance, with what the Ed Law is requiring and what the NIST framework is requiring to do. But to be in compliance, the IT department is limited in its resources, so it needs more assets, and more support to reach that maturity level and reach, that compliance piece. So we work well with, Ryan Maloney and his department, and, they're great people, but we do understand, where they're struggling, where they need help. But the NIST gap analysis is a good roadmap, for his department and generally for the district to prioritize what they need to do and, meet that compliance level. But again, it's not just Port Washington, and we see a lot of school districts and, they're making a lot of efforts to be in compliance in that aspect. And last but not least, we see a reduction in the risk rating from our low to in the policy management, where we saw the insurance policies regarding cybersecurity, have been raised to what was originally. So that was a good, direction for the district. Now, the remaining pages of the report details more the observations and the recommendations. I spoke about number one regarding the reports on the district's website. I didn't speak about the number two regarding the pre-approval of overtime from the facilities department, where right now we know it's requested, but it's only an informal process, not verbally or through email. We want to have this a more formal process, and document it as pre-approval and then review it, when the actual timesheet comes in to compare. But the pre-approval process not only helps, with the management of the overtime, but also helps, with the budgeting of the overtime cost as well. We did speak about number three regarding extra classroom activity funds and the faculty auditor. And another piece of our risk assessment update includes a review of the status of the prior year recommendations. So we had two recommendations, one in the capital, in the facilities department, we did a capital project cycle with, the recommendation to have the documented procedures. So we saw that had been complete, and also with the insurance of the cybersecurity. As an exhibit to the risk assessment, we have included the history of our internal audit services from the commencement, engagement with the district. So you have a history of all the work that we have done from the fiscal year of 7-8 all the way through 21-22. We'd like to show this to the audit committee and to the board so you can see all the areas that we have touched, throughout, our years. And we still have copies of all the reports, so if you're looking for a report, we can, provide that to you. But as you can see from the last years, we worked on cybersecurity, we worked on capital projects, we worked on fuel personnel services. So every year, we're making a plan, what the next area would be. And the one that we selected, for this year was the safety and security cycle. And if you see from the history of services, this is an area that we selected not because we thought it was a risky area, but we selected it because it was an area that we haven't really touched it in depth. And we wanted to, look at it more. But it's also a very timely subject, after safety and security issues that we have experienced in the past, school year, we wanted to make sure that the district, follows its state act plan or follows, the drills that, are scheduled and have procedures in place that, keep monitoring the other security processes. Any questions so far? So, Christine, do you want to go?
Sure. I'd like to just discuss the corrective action plan for those three recommendations. The first one regarding the website and having the audit reports. The district does have the external audit reports, which are really financials. Those are there. Jessica has worked with Shannon to actually put out the internal reports as well and the corrective action plan. So we're also trying to make it more findable because that was one of the issues I myself was going on trying to find it, it's a little difficult, so we've switched to a new website, and that's made it much easier, much more user-friendly, so I'm hoping that helps, just people who are inquiring. So, this second recommendation about the facilities pre-approval document for the overtime, I spoke with Brian Graham, our new director of facilities. He had spoken with you too, I think. He did develop a sheet, and he spoke with our assistant suit for human resources, Dr. Shields, and he looked at it and approved it. So this is something he's put in place, I think, like since he met with you, probably like October, November, beginning of November. So, the other was the one that I wanted to discuss, the faculty advisor, well, faculty auditor. Currently, what's happening is the central treasurer meets with Donna, and Donna actually sees the report. So that's kind of one type of control that we have, that she's not just rogue, like writing checks and stuff, nobody's looking at it. We also have the assistant principal, Christina Neese. She works very closely with the central treasurer, and when checks have to be written, she sees that, so it's kind of, we both sat down, Donna and I, with the two of them, what's her last name? Kitley and Christina Neese, and we discussed the process. The issue with appointing a faculty advisor, I don't know that the faculty is necessarily going to have the expertise to know how to audit the books and everything. And then is that something the district has to pay for? I'm wondering if Donna, being our treasurer, who's appointed by the Board of Ed, she has the expertise to look at things and see if things make sense or don't make sense. And also the high school assistant principal overseeing things as well.
Is that new? Is that something that has always taken place? Or, because I think the question is based on the internal audit. Was that in place when they're still making that recommendation, or is this something that we are making adjustments on?
That I'm honestly not sure of, because do you
I
know?
think we've always been doing that. The central treasurer reviewed the bank recs at the end of the,
With the
With the assistant principal?
With the assistant principal?
she has always oversaw.
Right, but have you reviewed the books with her? Like, have you ever done that?
I'm only here 2 years, but
Okay,
this is the first year
yes.
that.
So this year, I'm just saying, I guess I'm questioning, is that something that you saw happen or we need to further do?
We could have a more formal process if the assistant principal, we could maybe have her sign off on the bank recs, that she's reviewed it.
So just to clarify here, we do know that the process exists, but now I'm trying to address a finding from the state controller. Okay, where I don't want to see this in the district, and we do know that there's compensating controls, in place. But the idea to have a faculty auditor is to review the books of records maintained by the central treasurer and the club advisor, and making sure that they have records in place, number one, and they agree, with the activity and with their balances. So we do know that bank recs are done. We do know that but a faculty auditor, cannot be the person who does the bank recs and
Right.
cannot do the signing checks.
Right, which the assistant principal doesn't sign checks. If there's a question about should something be paid, then she's consulted, just.
And I have these conversations with a lot of districts, and they have assigned the faculty auditor to be the assistant principal, who, number one, they're not paying the stipend, for that, but is still considered to be a good candidate to be a faculty auditor according to the exit classroom activity pamphlet. And that person can, if they have that expertise and skills to review those records between the central treasurer and the club advisors. And, do these audits sporadically or on a sample basis and, report to get us done, we did these audits and these are our findings.
And that's something that has to be done at like the reorg meeting where they're specifically saying,
We
if the district
recommended,
would have,
Mhm.
it would say this is the classroom auditor
Yes,
for such and
it will,
such.
yes, it will be recommended to like have it as part of your reorg meetings.
So you're saying it would be okay to appoint the assistant principal?
As long as the assistant principal is not like, doing the bank recs or signing checks, then
That's
yes.
what she said.
Mhm. But it has to do, like an audit, like, so if we need,
Similar what, more.
We need documentation.
Documentation.
Right.
A formal audit.
Once
Right.
a quarter, she's looking at,
yeah,
this is bankrupt, this is what the club advisor has, do they match? And
exactly.
if not, they make comments and sense.
Or is it something that you would want the claims auditor to do?
That's what
That's what I was wondering too.
She's already doing something similar.
I think that's.
Okay, well, I guess
Is there a
either
reason
one would
why-
be acceptable.
Why a faculty advisor versus the internal claims auditor?
They're not really specific,
Okay.
who has to be, it just has to make sure that there's some
An
segregation.
independent person process.
I'm just saying from my experience, they have assigned the assistant principal in the district that I'm working on because, number one, the claims auditor, well, you have an employee to be your claims auditor, where the other districts have a firm, doing the claims audits. And it will be like an extra fee for the claims auditor to review these sex investment theory reports. But the assistant principal also makes sense because works with the club advisors and knows the central treasurer, so knows more about, these clubs and what they do.
And they have a relationship with the club advisors where they can more easily get those reports from the club advisors.
Yeah, right, because at that building.
Right.
Makes sense.
Just a question, because the reconciliation part makes sense, but it also mentioned the audit, so what I guess I'm trying to understand as it talks about collections, is there concern that we're not accurately reporting and documenting what the collections were?
Yes. So this, just to refresh your
Right,
memory
that's
from
what
the
I
last
thought.
one, this is all the student clubs at the high school for
Right.
the most part, which have a cash basis. Maybe there's a student collecting $3. Does the $3 get to the treasurer? Does the treasurer, does the student write it down, right? How is that process really being followed? So that's where the concern is.
And have other school districts figured this out? Because from what I remember last time,
Keep
the
talking.
external auditor said, no. I just want to understand if this is a common thing or
They
if it's not.
pretend to have figured it
Okay.
But yeah, I agree, that's why the assistant principal makes sense though, because they're there, they know what's going on, and it's a pair of eyes watching it, that knows what's happening.
I mean, after classroom activity, observations, recommendations have been common in every type of report, whether external or internal audit report. And it's not just because, hey, we want to write something about, and we found like an easy target. I don't believe that's the case. I believe it's because it's its own nature. Okay, you're dealing with cash. You're dealing with kids' money. It's not the district's money, it's the kids' money.
Right.
And there is risk, reputation risk. God forbid, like, $5 are missing, then somebody on Facebook, will say something, and then a teacher's reputation gets ruined. So what we had in here as an observation and recommendation is really to protect, them, to protect the district from these types of risks. All right,
Kathy, did you get for a discussion point, what you needed to add?
Yes.
Especially, and did anyone else have anything that they wanted to add from this point? I just have one question on the assessment.
sure.
So I know that we talked about the cybersecurity and we've gone from low to moderate, and last year was our first year doing the audit, right? And then there was no listing of corrective actions, but you did talk about the fact that they are ongoing, we have room for growth, and we're still, I think, operating off of our NIST and cybersecurity audit that we did last year, right? So this is a marriage between two of them, but that other one still had outstanding work that they're working on, and that was going to take more time. Is that my understanding of how this comes together, or are there any corrective actions additional from the last audit that are coming out of this?
So, great question, and, we had a number of observations and recommendations in our cybersecurity and risk gap analysis, but we strongly recommend that those recommendations are kept in that report.
Right, for
Okay,
confidentiality
for
purposes.
confidentiality purposes. We did not include them in this risk assessment because this is a public document, it will be foilable, it will be on your website, and I don't want this report to be a vulnerability for the district. So we had these recommendations, we had our discussions, regarding the cybersecurity maturity levels, and we're planning to follow up with the IT department on the implementation status. However, we know that it takes a little time to implement that. There was some of them had a budget impact, so it needed, budget, voter and, board approval, for these extra costs. So we wanted to wait until, all the puzzle pieces, fall together to review.
So I would imagine that going to what you were saying about the budgetary implications and that you originally said there were resources needed in the IT department, that would be something that we would be seeing in our budget numbers going into this year.
Some of it we have already in place because we did fund the money to do it. Yeah, but we had an audit committee meeting where people were saying, this is really important, let's get this in place. So we did actually do that.
And there'll be
But
more
yes,
going forward, and there's more needed going forward into this next budget.
Yes.
Right.
We need more resources, and that's not surprising.
Right.
In the districts that you're looking at, are the resources more towards hiring internal people or getting expertise from outside people that come in on a consulting basis?
Great question, and my answer is both, okay? So the best way for me to explain is that your IT department is great, and you have great people. And they're doing all they can to make sure that the operations are running, meaning that you have a network working, that the backups are there, that the, schools are running with their application.
You're not gonna say anything that
Doesn't sound like
No, no.
he's just giving a general
Just a very,
answer.
it's something that I would say, to a presentation, actually. On Friday, I'm actually giving a presentation about cybersecurity with the Institute of Internal Auditors, and I'm gonna talk about cybersecurity. So the thing that I'm talking about is, very common, that these IT departments are great, okay? But in my mind, you also need a cybersecurity department. Okay, because the IT department is gonna make sure that all the operations are working, but because of the limited resources, the cybersecurity department will address all the cybersecurity issues, the compliance, pieces, the EDLO 2D, the NIST framework, okay? And you need, as you said, not only people, but you need experts, in this area. So you need people who are not gonna be distracted with setting up a computer. You need people who are gonna be focusing on monitoring, alerts, or, making sure that they have access to any threat information that is in the public, and, making sure that the network infrastructure is addressing it, So that's what, in my mind, this district needs, but a lot of school districts.
Right.
But in terms of external versus internal, what's your feeling about that? Both from a cost effectiveness point of view and in terms of getting the right type of expertise and the right type of person, internally, they're able to work better and more integrated. But on the other hand, maybe they're not gonna be as much expertise and exposed to as much as somebody on a consulting basis. So
Right.
which way do you think is the way to go, really, in your experience?
In this day, with this tight labor market, I have seen so many musical chairs. And to have one person hire and hopefully it works out, but then in a year that person leaves and goes somewhere else, then it causes a very big disruption, in your whole IT and cyber infrastructure. And because of the limited resources, a lot of clients are going to like private companies to address those concerns because they feel that they'll have more continuity and more, standardized process. It's, and a lot of it has to do, how people, feel like, working alone in this area now until they find more people. There's a lot of, things to like consider hiring somebody. And unless, unless, the department grows big enough and you have a good team working together, then, keeps that longevity. So as of now, comparatively, like I've seen, I haven't seen any school district have a separate cyber department. And very few I've seen like, really staying for a long time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Dr. Block, did you have another?
That was my question.
Okay.
Excellent.
And I guess, and we can always have an executive session if we want to have an update on our implementation from the NIST and cybersecurity audit, if that's necessary, as a follow-up from last year as well. So I will add that on as a tickler potentially for April to see if it's in a stage that's worthwhile of an update.
Sure.
So Dimitri and I were just briefly discussing, I guess we can bring it up here. They actually, outside of their internal audit, they could go and look at the NIST analysis and really critique where are we now.
As a follow-up then from the last one that we did last year then? Yes,
Right. So when we did the NIST, it was, part of a separate engagement. And, here, for us to do the follow-up, we want to continue that to be a separate engagement.
I see.
So it doesn't take any time, from the risk assessment and the cycle reviews. So, we can create, a separate, audit scope and proposal for the continuing monitoring piece. It's not as intense or extensive as it was the initial. So you can understand, like, the initial, we had to start the ground running, start running a lot, but now we have that knowledge, so continued monitoring, it takes a lot less effort. And our way of doing it is, we're gonna look at the prior year recommendations, see where we are. We're also gonna look at whether anything has changed, in directions that the district has taken. And another piece is also to participate in the IT committee meetings. And, we're not gonna have an opinion, we're not gonna have anything to say, just as the listeners, to see, what the IT department, what the IT committee is discussing and what direction, they're going for.
If the committee is in agreement, I would recommend that we ask for a proposal just to see what that would cost. Think about it and add this as a topic for our discussion at our next meeting, if that's all right, because it would be something that would be an action item for us to invest in potentially as a district moving forward and make a recommendation. Does that seem like a worthwhile endeavor?
Yeah.
Okay, we have homework, is that, you all have homework? Is that okay? All right, wonderful. Okay, so with that, if everyone's in agreement, I think we can move on to the security aspect, right? The
Yes,
update?
of course. So we also wanted to give you an update of where we are as of now. So we had this, simple 2-page status report where we wanna show you and give you an update of where we are with this safety and security cycle. The objective here is to review the internal controls pertaining to safety and security procedures, making sure that they're, adequately performed and, securing the district's assets. We have met certain audit, benchmarks, like we have our initial planning back in September, October. We interviewed key employees, in the conversation, was also Kathleen, but also your security director, your facilities director, and employees, in those departments. A week ago, right, we were on site where we did a walkthrough observation of the drills and the safety measures that are taking in the building. And right now, we're in the process of analyzing the records that we requested, and we're in the process of drafting a report. The report will cover areas such as the general organizational structure, analysis of the safety and security plan. We'll give you our observations, regarding the building access, procedures, which include what we observed during our walkthrough, but also we're going to do a comparison between the building access key access report to the employee listing in Envision, to make sure that only active employees are actually active card holders. If there's any former employees that are still active card holders, that we bring that to the district's attention. It's a good exercise. We do this for a lot of our clients, and a lot of times we find accesses to former employees. Sometimes we also see accesses that employees shouldn't have. So one recent example was where we saw a teacher having board member type access. The board member has access to all the buildings, but the teacher.
Not here.
We have no access.
Interesting, yes.
Yeah, it was quite alarming,
The keys are
So, and we're also gonna talk about incident reporting and safety and training. So all these areas are gonna be covered during our audit, and we're gonna present them in our report. And as always, when we have a cycle report, we include detailed narratives as exhibit, where we describe the procedures, step by step as we go. All right, so we plan to have a draft report to the management team by February, and by the end of February, I think we'll have a draft report to the audit committee as well.
Okay, that's great.
Okay. So we're in the, even though we just discussed the risk assessment, we have been very active, over the fall and now, with this cycle, just so we can keep, the internal audit process going. We also, in our internal audit plan, we also included key control testing, which is limited scope testing in other areas other than the big focus area. So we are looking at fund balance management, we look at use of facilities, and fixed asset inventory. The first two ones, we have already started. With the use of facilities, we have selected a sample. We're asking for supporting documentation, regarding the use of facilities, like their applications and, the documentation for certificate of building insurance, and further down, documentation to support that they, paid for their use of facilities. Then fund balance management, we have already started with Donna on that analysis. So we're gonna create a template, of analyzing 3-year prior trends, current, budgets, rationales and assumptions to see and assess where the district will be by the end of June. And fixed asset inventory, that's a physical walkthrough. We'll select a sample of fixed assets that have been recently purchased by the district. We're going to do a walkthrough to make sure that these assets exist and they're at the location that are listed in the property.
Do the fixed assets include the computers, the laptop computers that the students have been issued, or?
We can include in our sample it's a random sample.
Right.
If you're interested in us looking at that,
It's just a new asset that we've accumulated a number of, and they tend to walk a lot, right? Just by nature of the fact that they go back and forth to homes. I just didn't know if they're included in that as well.
so with those movable items, we're not gonna test it, because
Right.
I don't wanna, it's gonna be hard to like
That's-
ask the kid to bring it in so we
Right.
can do our audit, but if we have in our inventory list like the cart that holds like Chromebooks, we will possibly select that.
And technology has its own separate
Yeah.
management of that.
And when we did the cybersecurity and gap analysis, we did look at the inventory records, the hardware assets. That's one of the requirements. So we did look at the IT department has a detailed list of all the IT equipment connected to the network, and they're all like, protected, through like a firewall and, intruder detection systems.
Okay.
And then, we do a full circle in our internal audit plan, back in June, where we're gonna do another risk assessment.
Start all over again, yes.
So that was our presentation for today.
Do you guys have any questions in regards to the safety and security cycle audit with phase?
So my question is, the draft comes to the audit committee planned somewhere around, say, February 23, so I guess we would have to add,
I think we should change our
Why not?
meeting date.
so that's just one procedural thing, but it
So
wouldn't,
the draft usually comes to like the business office, right?
right, it says
Yes.
business and then it says audit committee. That runs,
Yeah, so we go
March.
we go by the end of February, March, you'll have it.
Would it be executive? So if we were to have a meeting, would that be, is it something that would be protected as far in executive concept, security wise? Not something for you to think about.
Yeah,
I'm
let's.
just putting it out there.
Mhm.
The other thing that I wanted to ask about that is that the district put together generated a committee called the Safety Committee. So I don't know if you've had, as part of your discussions with your personnel, the key employees, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to learn more about that committee and because it's my understanding that they are also reviewing processes and that they are also going to be making recommendations.
We're planning to do an audit.
Planning. Right,
Yeah.
so I'm just kind of hoping that Peter and Paul are speaking, is
Right.
basically what I'm saying.
And during our interviews, we learned about the committee, we learned about, what their initiatives are, what they're planning to do. And our audit scope includes, to get that understanding, and see, whether the committee had a recommendation and whether we're following that recommendation. I just wanna be also clear, we're not the safety and security experts.
Right.
So we're not a company that provides these services. However, as internal auditor, we can certainly look at what your policies are, what your procedures are, and making sure that we're following.
Got
Okay. So districts have a safety plan. We wanna make sure that, first of all, do we cover all the requirements, from the state? And then do we follow this plan? And from there, if the committee has, has done its audit and, had certain corrective action plans, did the security department follow these recommendations?
Got it.
Sounds good. Other questions? No? Yes?
Overall, based on the work you've done here, how does Port compare to your other clients on Long Island?
In safety and security or?
No, in
In
general.
general, I want to say that we have been here for a long time and the risk profile is very low and it's very positive, to keep that, risk profile, given the fact that we passed a COVID era and from our experience with other clients, we have seen that controls have like laxed because the supervision was not there. However, Port Washington has seen that continuity, and, we're happy to see that. So you're doing, fairly well. And it's an organization that, we see that all people work together. You have a good leadership team, but overall, the people, are really working well together.
Great. As somebody who's been on this committee from the beginning, this has been a recurring theme from internal audit and external audit. And it's very gratifying as a community member to hear this and see that our district, is a good example for Long Island.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think then from an outstanding business from us, and thank you both for presenting, appreciate it, is that maybe we should look, our next meeting is scheduled for the end of April. We did it after budget season, it's a little crazy, but in the event that there's anything that we may need to address or add or whatnot, if you think your reports will be done end of February, maybe we should look to change our meeting into March at some point. We can confer with Kathy in her office and with your office to see what the best availability is and throw some dates out to the committee if that works for everyone. I don't think we need to noodle that right now, right? So we can look into that, but we'll just keep the April 26th date on the calendar as well as a just in case for this point. Is that all right? Okay. Does anyone else have anything that they need to add from the committee? No? Excellent. All right. This is a required committee by the state, so we follow the procedures and processes. The members of the committee participate. It's not a typical committee that we ask for community comments, but if there are clarifying committee questions from the community, I'm happy to entertain those since we have our experts here. Ms. Nolan, Ms. Chilbani, you have a clarifying question?
Yes, I do have a few questions. Theodore Chilbani, I'm a taxpayer in the district, and also I represent the media, so if you're comfortable with that. The North Shore leader. Are you okay with my questions?
Are they relevant?
They are.
Oh, you're representing the media?
I'm representing myself as a taxpayer in the district, but I also represent the North Shore leader. So I just want to get that out, just make sure.
I don't know that it's appropriate as far as the audit committee is concerned. If you have
I can respect that.
a clarifying question regarding this, just because the
Yes.
sensitivity of the nature, and you didn't understand something that was presented, I think that that's what we should stick to as a clarifying question at this point.
All it means is I have some questions. You can choose to answer them to me as a taxpayer, or you could choose to answer them to me both as a taxpayer and a contributor to the North Shore leader. So it's totally up to you. If all it means is one is on the record publicly, likely I will mention it in the contributing piece, and one is just for myself. So
I do not know the answer to how to handle this question, and we can answer it as a taxpayer, and I think again, the question is you could ask the question if it's just clarifying.
I'm sorry, I'm stepping in. I just think that since this committee's not set up for community comments, I think if it is a live stream meeting, so
Yes.
I think if anyone has any questions, community member or media, it should go to the general board meeting, which is on the 31st. So I think we should end it right here. And I would recommend that you come to the meeting on the 31st and ask your questions. I just because by law,
on the 31st
it's not.
of what?
The January
This month.
31st
So
Board of
on
Education.
January 31st,
Right.
we'll take these questions.
Yeah, I mean.
Under community comments, isn't
Under
it?
community comments,
community
right?
comments.
Remember how we do it?
Community comments is not a question.
No, we do, we
We
answer
did answer
questions
the
at the following
questions.
meeting.
Okay,
Yes.
so you will take my question during community comments and answer.
Yes.
At the following meeting,
That's a
that's the
good
procedure of the Board of Education. They answer questions, so on the 31st, you will ask your question hypothetically, and then at the following meeting,
Which is February 7th.
February 7th, you'll get your answer. That's the new policy we put in place last year that is still continuing this
It's
year.
consistent with open meetings with the state. Law?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it
It's
is.
actually
It is.
further,
Perfect.
It is.
further consistent.
I think that's a great, thank you, Emily, for
Thank
that
you.
guidance. No, I appreciate that guidance.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
That's a great process.
Nice to see you again, too.
Yes. All right. Thank you for that. Excellent. Anyone else? Okay, well, with that then, Ms. Mack, if you could please end the live stream, we appreciate
I'll
it.
plug both things.
All right. Thank you. Our meeting's adjourned. We'll be in touch. Ruth, thank you again for everything.